Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg. Now, as you probably are aware by now, it is Pride Month. I have my Pride stash ready to go. I'm just waiting for the event to get here. So I wanted to talk to you about some of the queer books and authors that I would like to prioritize my reading this month. First, a note, I had thought about participating in an actual readathon about on this topic. I decided not to. I don't really do well with readathons. It's nothing really particular against them. It's just I prefer to explore the topic on my own without going by somebody else's prompts. I'm really stubborn that way. That's all. So I originally was going to do just a list of my LGBTQI TBR pile, but that is a really long list. So I'm dividing it into two different videos. I have the list published on my blog. I will link that down below. If you are watching this further away from the date that I'm publishing it, I will also put the second video down below. If you are watching this live, I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait for the second video until tomorrow. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I'm prioritizing for this month. This month happens to also be the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Riot, which launched the modern pride movement as we know it. So you are going to see that reflected in it. But it's a kind of big list. So let's get going. The first one is actually something I have already finished. It's Transgender History, the Roots of Today's Revolution. Sorry, I almost lost it on the subtitle. This is by Susan Stryker. It was originally published in 2008. It was revised in 2017, which is fantastic because so much happened in the decade after that, including the election of Donald Trump, which has raised new challenges to the movement, even when it looked like it was making a lot of progress under President Obama, and that is reflected in this book. I will say, I'll talk about this more in a reading wrap-up, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I will say, as someone who is familiar with a lot of the transgender or gender terminology, I didn't really need the first section of this book, which very much deals in defining terms, but it was easy enough for me to skip ahead and get past that to the meatier parts of the book. Meatier parts sounds gross, I'm sorry, but I'm not editing it out, so there you go. It is, I think, an essential read for anybody who wants to explore this topic. It's literally right there in the name, LGBTQ. The T is something we can't forget, and it's something I have traditionally not had a whole lot of knowledge about, but I've been trying to catch up, and I think that's something we should all do. So there you go, that's all. Next is the book that I am currently reading, which is Lighthouse Keeping by Jeanette Winterson. This is the story of Silver, who becomes an apprentice to a blind lighthouse keeper after the death of her mother. He tells her stories that reveal the world to her, and I'm not there yet, but I think ultimately this is going to have a message about love. The way the book was described to me, there's a sort of coming out. I don't know if that was a spoiler. I hope not, because I'm only halfway through, and we haven't quite gotten to the part of it that would cover that. But I'm looking forward to finishing it and talking to you more about it. If nothing else, Jeanette Winterson herself is a lesbian, so she definitely fits the bill for this category. So there you go. I also just got access to the audiobook of, I don't know if it's Gerard or Jared Conley's memoir about undergoing gay conversion therapy, which is Boy Erased. I saw the movie. It was okay, but I really want to experience Conley's firsthand account of what happened to him, so I'm looking forward to listening to that. Now, again, because this is the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Riot, I think this is a perfect time to read the Stonewall Reader, which is from the New York Public Library. It's an anthology of firsthand accounts, diaries, newspaper articles centered around the event itself, but also the 5 years leading up to the riot and the 5 years that followed it and all of the massive change that happened as a result. I am absolutely looking forward to reading this. It is particularly timely. Now, I'm also trying to get access to an audio version of How to Survive a Plague, the inside story of how citizens in science tamed AIDS, but I have not had any luck as of yet. I'm probably just going to end up ordering a physical copy of the book at this point from my local indie. So the title pretty much sums up what this is about, but if you need help, it's about activists fighting for survival in a society that really didn't care if they lived or died in the face of the AIDS epidemic. The reason I want the audio, if I can get it, is that it is read by Rory O'Malley, who is a Broadway actor and who founded the activist group Broadway Impact. Like I said, at this point, I'm probably going to get the physical copy, but if I can get the audio, that's, through my library or some method of borrowing, that is what I would like to do. But again, since we're talking about the anniversary of Stonewall, it seems like this is a good time to read Edmund White's City Boy, My Life in New York During the 1960s and 70s. Edmund White is considered a classic LGBTQ author. He has written some landmark books in queer fiction. This seems like the one to prioritize for right now. You will see him again in the video that I do tomorrow because I would like to read at least one of his novels. But this seems particularly timely for this month because it is very much about that tumultuous time when gay activism was moving into the mainstream. There was still a gay subculture in New York City, and I believe White was actually present at the Stonewall Inn the night of the riot, so it just sounds like a fascinating read, something I would really like to get to. Now, a lot of what I've talked about so far is nonfiction, but of course there are definitely fiction books that I'd like to get to as well, and there's probably no better book for this TBR than a classic in the genre, which is Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holleran. It's about a man looking for meaningful companionship in the emerging gay scene in New York City in the 1970s, which is going to be a theme in a lot of these books. One thing I've noticed is I have a bit of a gap in books that reflect the gay subculture that happened in the 60s and 70s, and that is something I would like to do better on. So this is one of the books, along with this one, that will help me get to that. Now, for a different perspective on queer literature, I'd like to read Uzodinma Onwuela's Speak No Evil. This is a novel about Niru, who is the son of conservative Nigerian immigrants in the United States. When his father finds out that Niru is gay just before Niru is supposed to begin attending Harvard, there is a brutal fallout. I think the addition of the immigrant story and the focus on African characters makes this sound like a great, if brutal, read from the author of Beasts of No Nation. Definitely want to get to that. Also, I had not known that The Women of Brewster Place, which is Gloria Naylor's collection of interlocked stories about black women living in an inner city sanctuary, had an LGBT angle until recently, and I fully admit that skyrocketed it up my TBR pile, and I would love to get to it because, again, I think diversity within queer literature is good. That's one reason I had included the book I just talked about, and one reason I would really like to get to this. And if you remember books that jump out at me, one thing that really appeals to me about books is that it's going to teach me something I didn't already know or show me experiences outside of my own, and this would help me do that. Now, I discovered Edward Lewis's novel The End of Eddie, which is white, so it's having a hard time being seen. There we go. Through the Tournament of Books. It did not make it far in that competition, but it was there long enough to make it onto my TBR. This is a fictionalized version of the author's experience growing up gay, poor, and bullied in a French factory town, which is, again, an experience I have not had in life, so it should be interesting. It is also very short, so it should be fairly easy to get to. Okay, and when Patrick McCabe's Breakfast on Pluto was published, it became a #1 bestseller in Ireland. It was a finalist for the Man Booker Prize. But at that time, there was not a lot of understanding about the spectrum of gender and gender identities. Its protagonist, Patrick Braden, who is nicknamed Pussy, is described as a transvestite. That term is not currently used 20 years later. So on one level, there's a lot of potential for Breakfast on Pluto to be both outdated and offensive, even if it meant well at the time. On another level, I think it would be really fascinating to read something from a time before our understanding of gender identity and gender fluidity broadened. It could be a great portrait of a life lived before there was even adequate terminology to describe who someone is. So, and again, this is a short book, so hopefully I can fit this in. Now, I've had the Pulitzer Prize winning play Angels in America on my TBR for a shamefully long amount of time. It is a classic about AIDS and politics and religion and humanity. They did just release an audio version of this book, which has the cast of the Broadway revival that had actually originated in London recently. So I may hold out to do the audio, which is not available through my library right now. But regardless, this is an essential book for me to read in my lifetime. I absolutely want to get to it. All right, and then the young adult market is one of the most popular and profitable markets in publishing today, and it's also, without a doubt, the most inclusive and diverse section in any bookstore or library. Queer representation is experiencing a boom in the YA market, and I really couldn't be happier about that. So, Jandy Nelson's I'll Give You the Sun is one such YA book. It follows estranged twins named Jude and Noah. They used to be inseparable, but now they barely speak, and I'll Give You the Sun is about their journey back to each other as they come of age. As you can see, this one is a Stonewall honored book. It also won a Prince honor. Anytime I talk about this book, people immediately jump out to tell me that I need to read it, so I need to read it. Now, I briefly talked about this in a previous book haul, but Thomas Page McBee was the first transgender man to box in Madison Square Garden. An Amateur, A Reckoning with Gender Identity and Masculinity, is the story of his quest to uncover what makes a man as he questions masculinity, both traditional and toxic, sexism and privilege. It sounds fascinating. And finally, for my current month TBR, we have Confessions of a Mask, which is a classic of modern Japanese fiction by Yukio Mishima. It is about a teenager struggling with his sexuality in post-war Japan. In order to survive, he needs to build a metaphorical mask that he must wear at all times. It sounds depressing, essential, and fascinating. So there you go. Those are the books that I'm going to be... Obviously, I'm not going to be getting to all of these this month. I like to have a wide pool to choose from. That's part of why I always have trouble packing for vacation, because I feel like I need to give myself options. So, if you've read any of these and you think I should bump them up my list and get to them next, please let me know. If there's one in here that you think I can bump down the priority list, please let me know. If you have other recommendations, please let me know. And I would love to know if you're going to be reading anything for Pride Month as well. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are already subscribed, thank you. If you are not subscribed, I hope you enjoyed this enough to follow along on this crazy little adventure I'm going on here. And as always, I will be back. Until then, happy reading.